What unfolds when royalty consistently confines itself within its own lineage, not merely once but repeatedly across centuries? Beneath the illustrious portraits and venerable titles lies a concealed tradition marked by interwoven familial ties, cousins marrying cousins, uncles courting nieces, where dynasties fold inward like gravitational collapse. This is less a family tree than a closed circle, where every crown is born on a bloodline of unnerving familiarity. In this exploration, we shall trace 33 of the most intricately interrelated unions in British royal history. These are not mere myths or whispers but documented marriages and alliances grounded in shared ancestry. The pertinent inquiry is not why these unions occurred but how such patterns persisted without cessation. Before we delve into the labyrinth of royal affiliations and recurring generational patterns, consider engaging with this discourse. Your participation helps illuminate this complex historical tapestry. As you join us, reflect upon your place in this global matrix and the hour at which you observe this examination. Together, we shall uncover the extensive reach of this enduring royal web. Queen Victoria emerged from a lineage so intricately intertwined that its family tree resembled a knot with branches doubling back upon themselves, symbolizing a dynasty lacking fresh extension for generations. Born Alexandrina Victoria of the House of Hanover, her name bore a delicate grace, yet the empire she came to reign was anything but gentle, nor was her matrimonial alliance. Ascending the throne at 18, by 20 she had fallen deeply for her first cousin, Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha. The familial proximity of their union was hardly controversial within Victorian aristocracy, where close kinship was not only accepted but esteemed as a means of preserving purity and power. Albert, embodying the restrained charm and principled demeanor characteristic of 19th-century German nobility, was both Victoria's muse and her mirror, sharing not only heritage but an aligned worldview, valuing control, propriety, and familial loyalty above all. Their marriage, celebrated publicly as a genuine love story, simultaneously served as a strategic fortification of the Coburg dynasty. In personal correspondence, Victoria lauded Albert as her angel and perfect consort, yet also as the master, a testament to her willingness to surrender authority to a blood relative. Together they fathered 9 children, each becoming a vital thread in the complex web of European dynastic politics. Victoria and Albert wielded their offspring not merely as heirs but as instruments of diplomatic alliance, forging connections that earned Victoria the moniker the Grandmother of Europe. Through these meticulously arranged cousin marriages, her blood coursed through royal houses from England to Russia, sometimes doubly intertwined, ensuring continuity but also intensifying genetic homogeneity. Beneath this veneer of imperial grandeur lurked a darker legacy, the hereditary affliction of haemophilia, a disorder that silently circulated through Victoria's lineage, exacting a grim toll on several descendants and haunting ruling houses like the Romanovs, whose tragic fate deep in Siberia underscored the genetic vulnerabilities hidden within royal purity. Historians variably describe Victoria as a carrier queen or a matriarch of both empire and inherited sorrow. Her zealous commitment to keeping it in the family secured political stability at the expense of genetic health. Despite such costs, the enduring image of Victoria and Albert remains one of profound devotion. She mourned Albert for 4 decades, clad perpetually in black, preserving a lock of his hair until death, a gesture. Prince Albert emerges in history as a figure seemingly preordained by lineage and expectation. Polished, principled, and impeccably refined, yet inevitably entangled with the woman destined to helm an empire. His arrival in Victoria's life was less mere happenstance than the fruition of dynastic strategy. As her first cousin, the son of her maternal uncle, Albert was the family-sanctioned candidate, embodying the ideal fusion of bloodline continuity and political prudence. Raised in the austere, regimented environs of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, His demeanor reflected an emotional restraint and disciplined etiquette that, though perhaps austere to outsiders, perfectly complemented Victoria's impassioned nature. To her, Albert was an emblem of steadiness and intellectual rigor, a figure as symmetrical and inevitable as a finely sculpted statue or a prized thoroughbred. Their courtship and subsequent marriage swiftly captured the public imagination as a romantic union wrought by love rather than political calculation. Yet beneath the ceremonial veneer lay a calculated confluence of interests. Albert's entrance solidified a dynastic loop, reinforcing monarchical continuity through shared blood and mutual obligation. Once wed, Albert assumed an almost managerial command of the monarchy, reorganizing its finances, refurbishing royal estates, and endeavoring, though ultimately unsuccessfully, to temper Victoria's fiery temperament. Their relationship, a study in contrasts, was united by a shared mission to perpetuate a lineage that already bore signs of its insular genetic legacy. Albert's life was characterized by disciplined devotion to duty, marked by early rising, meticulous record-keeping, and an almost ascetic pursuit of moral rectitude, not only for himself but as a guiding principle for the entire family and nation. His advocacy of science, rationalism, and moral uplift reflected an enlightened idealism, albeit one imbued with the paradox of marrying his cousin in the George IV's reign, commencing officially in 1820, reveals much about the contradictions inherent in hereditary monarchy, and indeed, in the person of the king himself. Prior to his coronation, George's flamboyant and reckless character had already played out publicly during his tenure as Prince Regent, when his father, George III, was incapacitated. This preliminary period showcased a man who eschewed political deftness in favor of personal extravagance. George's penchant for excess manifested across arenas, from architecture, with the extravagant and fantastical Brighton Pavilion, to fashion, financial excesses, and tumultuous romantic entanglements. Yet, beneath this flamboyance was a sovereign deeply bound to the strictures of dynastic expectations. The royal marriage, a transactional alliance steeped in family and political expediency, brought him to Caroline of Brunswick, his cousin. Their union, emblematic of monarchical strategy, was fraught with discord from the outset. George's disdain for Caroline, fueled by her forthrightness and lack of courtly polish, contrasted sharply with his own vanity and indulgences. Their marriage was little more than a public spectacle of mutual antagonism, marked by separation, accusations, and bitter conflicts emblematic of the tensions between personal dissatisfaction and dynastic duty. Their troubled relationship not only exposed the limitations and pressures of union by convenience, but also underscored the complex interplay between familial bonds and individual identities within royal life. George's marriage was less a manifestation of love and more a performance of obligation, reinforcing a system that prioritized lineage continuity over personal happiness. This dynamic bore further consequence when their only child, Princess Charlotte, the singular hope for succession, tragically died in childbirth. The ensuing succession crisis compelled George's brothers into hurried, similarly consanguineous marriages, underlining the monarchy's relentless drive to preserve its bloodline. George IV's personal legacy, therefore, is not in statesmanship or progeny but in exemplifying a culture of entitlement and performance intrinsic to monarchy. His life and reign illustrate how royal authority was as much about spectacle and image as governance, sustained by a system reliant on interwoven family ties. The royal marriage to Caroline symbolizes this tension, the melding of convenience and confrontation, affinity and alienation, a mirror reflecting not only political necessity but profound personal torment. Caroline herself, forbidding yet resilient, was no less a product of this intricate and often suffocating web of royal lineage. Thus, Their story provides a nuanced window into the burdens and compromises embedded within the institution of monarchy during a pivotal historical moment. Caroline of Brunswick's life within the British royal family presents a vivid illustration of the complexities and contradictions inherent in dynastic marriage. As the first cousin and bride of George IV, Caroline was less a figure of affection and more a political arrangement, chosen from a diminishing pool of European princesses who could offer both the semblance of alliance and the reassurance of shared lineage. Born a German duchess steeped in court formality, Caroline entered a union with George, a man already entangled in debt, infidelity, and a secret, unacknowledged marriage to Maria Fitzherbert. Their meeting just days before the wedding and George's reportedly shocked reaction set the tone for a relationship marked by indifference and discord rather than affection. The marriage, conducted with grandiosity but little warmth, produced one child, Princess Charlotte, and quickly disintegrated into estrangement. Caroline faced not only her husband's disdain but also a calculated campaign to discredit her, with accusations ranging from eccentricity to madness and constant surveillance of her household. Exiled from the court, she retreated across Europe, cultivating a peculiar court of loyalists and rumoured lovers, all the while amplifying her role as the aggrieved wife wronged by a corrupt establishment. This defiance, starkly contrasted with George's unpopularity, garnered her significant public sympathy, transforming her into a symbol of monarchy's human vulnerability. The crisis culminated when George ascended the throne in 1820 and Caroline returned to claim her status as Queen, igniting the national spectacle known as the Queen Caroline Affair. Parliament's failed attempt to strip her of her title and bar her from court only deepened public support, which manifested in widespread protests and satirical criticisms of the king. Though legally defeated, Caroline was famously denied entry to George's coronation, underscoring the personal and institutional conflicts that defined their relationship. Caroline's death a year later closed a chapter steeped in stress and struggle, yet her legacy endured as a testament to the limits of dynastic unions founded purely on blood ties. Her story exposed how shared ancestry need not translate into harmony but can instead confine individuals to opposing paths, revealing the gulf between royal expectation and human reality. George withdrew into extravagance and illusion, while Caroline emerged as a defiant figure simultaneously belonging and excluded, emblematic of the fragile, often performative nature of monarchy itself. Their fraught marriage unraveled the myth that lineage guarantees loyalty or decency, illustrating instead the profound personal costs behind royal ceremonial. While Caroline and George's union became a cautionary tale illustrating the pitfalls of cousin marriage, it also set the stage for subsequent royal relationships that would similarly intertwine love, politics, and bloodline, highlighting the enduring tension between public duty and private desire within the monarchy. Queen Elizabeth II ascended the throne in 1952 amid a monarchy long versed in concealing generations of complex and often troubling genealogical history. The royal narrative, carefully veiled by tradition, masked a legacy of violent successions, consanguineous marriages, and a notably limited gene pool. Even in the modern age, these ancestral conventions persisted, shaping the narrative that surrounded Elizabeth Alexandra Mary Windsor. Born into an environment steeped in orchestrated public image, her father, George VI, had reluctantly assumed kingship after his brother's controversial abdication, a stark lesson underscoring that royal unions must be calculated, dignified, and, above all, familial. When Elizabeth was poised to marry, the choice was no exception. Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark, a naval officer of striking physical presence, represented an ideal balance, exotic yet sufficiently connected by bloodlines to meet royal expectations. Their kinship, traced through Queen Victoria and King Christian IX of Denmark, underscored a lineage maintained as much through marriage as through governance. Their courtship, which began before World War II and flourished afterward, juxtaposed Elizabeth's composed, dutiful reserve against Philip's unorthodox charisma and penchant for bending rules. Their partnership, far from a mere romantic ideal, embodied the fusion of personal history with dynastic imperatives, a continuous thread in royal alliances. Their 1947 wedding, broadcast empire-wide, symbolized renewal and resilience in a world recovering from conflict. It stood as a modern spectacle grounded in ancient tradition, where royal marriages functioned to reinforce bloodlines as much as to celebrate personal unions. To outsiders, a marriage between third cousins might seem distant. For the royals, it reflected intimate continuity, with Queen Victoria's shadow lending both legitimacy and potential genetic complexities. Over decades, the marriage of Elizabeth and Philip became the steady axis of the Windsor line. Through 4 children, countless official duties, and a lifetime under the public gaze, their relationship was marked less by overt affection and more by steadfast partnership, reflecting the monarchy's emphasis on duty over intimacy. Philip's role as consort was uniquely his own. Behind the scenes, he propelled modernization efforts and engaged the media with a candid charm, while Elizabeth embodied unwavering responsibility rendered through reserve strength. Yet their union remained indelibly stamped by aristocratic conventions, raising children in an environment where national service took precedence over familial warmth, and where public appearance outweighed private tenderness. Their marriage exemplified the royal archetype, a union forged in duty, producing heirs, and maintaining stability. It was heralded as a rare success among cousin marriages, a testament to endurance rather than overt harmony. This juxtaposition reveals an irony. The perceived stability rested not on visible affection but on the weight of tradition and protocol. Elizabeth's unprecedentedly long reign weathered immense historical upheavals, with Philip ever present as confidant and kin, both companion and familial reflection. The poignancy of their union was underscored at Philip's funeral in 2021, where Elizabeth's solitary presence encapsulated not just personal loss but the fading of an era. When she passed a year later, she took with her the last living connection to a generation that upheld royal love as an internal, hereditary affair. Yet the bloodline persisted, her eldest son inheriting the throne, and with his reign evolving a new narrative where the interplay of love, legacy, and lineage would continue to challenge established patterns. While Elizabeth's marriage was grounded in duty and shared blood, Charles's unions would redefine these boundaries, revealing the enduring complexity of monarchy in the modern world. Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, emerged from a turbulent aristocratic lineage marked by exile and displacement. Born in 1921 as Prince Philip of Greece and Denmark, his early life was defined less by royal privilege and more by political upheaval, leaving him effectively orphaned and stateless by the age of 10. Despite lacking a stable homeland or fortune, Philip's complex bloodline connected him intimately to Europe's fading dynasties, descended from Queen Victoria on one side and King Christian IX of Denmark on the other. This intricate genealogy made him a close relative of the future Queen Elizabeth I, intertwining familial and diplomatic histories emblematic of the continent's shifting power. Their courtship unfolded quietly as Elizabeth was still a teenager. Philip's naval career and forthright manner stood in contrast to the reserved royal milieu. Conscious of his foreign heritage, Philip shed his Greek and Danish titles, adopted the anglicized surname Mountbatten, and embraced Anglicanism before their 1947 marriage, moves designed to reassure a war-weary British public craving continuity. Their union, though firmly within the accepted traditions of dynastic intermarriage, symbolized more than family ties. It embodied the monarchy's resilience amidst societal change. Philip's role remained complex and often ambiguous. Bereft of official power or wealth, his position as consort required a careful balancing act. Accustomed to leadership, he navigated the limitations imposed by his role with pragmatism, reshaping the royal household's operations and advocating for forward-thinking initiatives such as environmental conservation and youth development programs. Notably, his encouragement to televise Elizabeth's coronation embraced modernity, even as it challenged traditionalist sensibilities. The partnership between Elizabeth and Philip was defined by subtle negotiation of public duty and private rapport. Philip's candidness and Elizabeth's composure complemented each other, reflecting a marriage founded on mutual respect and shared purpose rather than romantic flourish. Their relationship mirrored broader royal imperatives, where loyalty and routine supplanted overt emotional expression, and genealogical ties functioned as strategic bonds reinforcing dynastic stability. However, this consolidation bore inherent tensions. The interwoven genetic legacy of the Windsor Mountbatten line intensified expectations upon their children, perpetuating the delicate balance between personal desire and dynastic obligation. Though not a power broker, Philip's presence tempered the monarchy's facade, his frankness serving as a counterpoint to the Queen's measured demeanour. Their union, among the most scrutinised royal marriages of the 20th century, ended with Philip's death in 2021, marking the closure of an era characterised by a particular archetype of royal masculinity, reserved, steadfast, and deeply rooted in historical precedent. Yet, the implications of their alliance extended beyond their lifetimes, influencing the succeeding generations' approach to royal marriage, wherein the complex interplay of love, duty, and lineage continued to shape the monarchy's evolving identity. King Charles III, born Prince Charles in 1948, emerged into a world defined less by personal identity and more by constitutional necessity. As the heir to the British throne, his existence was framed by an unyielding set of expectations emphasizing duty, decorum, and dynastic continuity within the Windsor line. Though largely cast as a compliant figure awaiting ascendance, Charles's life was paradoxically marked by subtle deviations from tradition that would later define his public and private struggles. The imperative to secure the monarchy's future culminated in the selection of Lady Diana Spencer as his wife, a choice steeped as much in aristocratic genealogy as in public appeal. Diana, hailing from the venerable Spencer family, shared distant ancestral ties with Charles, a genealogical linkage emblematic of the monarchy's long-standing practice of marrying within a circumscribed social milieu to preserve lineage and status. On paper, Diana epitomized the ideal consort, youthful, photogenic, and bearing a tempered strain of royal blood that made her acceptable to both court and public. Yet beneath the veneer of a fairy tale wedding broadcast worldwide, their marriage revealed deep fissures rooted in emotional distance and mismatched expectations. Charles, emotionally encumbered by lingering attachments and raised within a stoic, tradition-bound institution where vulnerability was suppressed, contrasted markedly with Diana's more sensitive, albeit inexperienced, disposition shaped by an upbringing haunted by uncertainty rather than privilege. Their union thus became more a public performance than a genuine partnership, sustained by the choreography of royal duty rather than mutual intimacy. The irony lay in their shared ancestry and aristocratic heritage, which bound them together genetically and symbolically even as their personal connection unraveled. Both descendants of royal lines intertwined through centuries of strategic unions. Charles and Diana epitomized the enduring ritual of in-family marriage designed to stabilize the monarchy. Yet, biological continuity could not ensure emotional harmony. Publicly, Diana achieved unprecedented popularity as the people's princess, embodying a modern sensitivity the monarchy struggled to project, while Charles remained emblematic of the institution's enduring, if anachronistic, authority. Their marriage's gradual dissolution reflected broader tensions between entrenched royal conventions and evolving societal norms. While often portrayed as romantic or strategic, their union was in essence a compromise crafted to sustain dynastic imperatives at the expense of personal fulfillment. Nonetheless, it fulfilled its principal function by producing heirs, William and Harry, thereby perpetuating the royal bloodline and affirming the underlying genealogical framework that, though largely invisible, remained central to the monarchy's identity. Charles's later marriage to Camilla, a figure long present in his life and more emotionally compatible, signaled both a personal and dynastic adjustment, though arriving after the royal narrative had already advanced through a new generation. The complexity of his story lies in how the very system intended to shape and secure his destiny also constrained and, paradoxically, undermined it. His experience exposed fissures within a hereditary tradition increasingly out of sync with contemporary realities. Yet the narrative extends beyond Charles himself, encapsulated in his children's lives, particularly that of Prince William. The practice of maintaining aristocratic lineage through carefully managed nuptials continues, albeit with modern finesse and discretion. The monarchy's enduring reliance on intrasocial marriages underscores a persistent, if evolving, tension between public scrutiny and the private demands of dynastic preservation in the modern era. Lady Diana Spencer's entry into the public sphere was often portrayed as a modern fairy tale, a narrative rooted in her aristocratic upbringing and serene demeanour. Raised with the polish of British nobility, Diana was the daughter of the 8th Earl Spencer, whose lineage extended back to the Tudors, and her maternal family linked to Irish peerage. More significantly, she shared a distant but meaningful ancestry with Prince Charles, tracing back to Henry VIII, making them 16th cousins once removed. This genealogical connection exemplified the monarchy's preference for marital alliances within aristocracy, distant enough to maintain propriety, yet close enough to preserve tradition. Diana occupied a liminal space, too noble to be common, yet not royal enough to embody the court's expectations seamlessly. At 19, as a young, reticent, and bookish woman, she stepped into the daunting role of Prince Charles's bride, largely unprepared for the relentless scrutiny and perfection demanded by royal life. The palace initially appeared ambivalent toward her. However, her recognizable aristocratic heritage, pleasant appearance, and acceptable bloodline made her a fitting choice. Their 1981 wedding, observed by hundreds of millions worldwide, presented an image steeped in ceremonial symbolism that masked the reality of two individuals strangers to each other and ill-suited for the roles they were fulfilling. Their marriage, while outwardly fulfilling dynastic duties through the birth of Princes William and Harry, was internally marked by dissonance. Diana's openness and emotional sensitivity clashed with the palace's culture of stoicism. Charles, bound by duty and haunted by unresolved personal issues, struggled to engage with the woman his bride aspired to be. Their union became a paradox, a public emblem of royal idealism that concealed profound private discord. Over time, Diana transcended the confines of traditional royal consort roles, emerging as a cultural icon defined less by her titles and more by her empathy and subtle defiance of monarchy's rigid norms. Yet her background, a blend of aristocracy and commoner status, ensured she was never quite the outsider she seemed. Instead, she embodied a complex identity, an aristocrat cloaked in humility and a cousin disguised as novelty, inevitably ensnared in the system that both exalted and constrained her. The marriage between Charles and Diana was thus less a union of hearts and more an alliance of compatible lineages, a convergence of expectations and traditions that left both parties yearning for different, unmet needs. Ultimately, Diana's enduring legacy reveals a compelling irony. The woman initially cast as a docile dynastic bride became one of the most profoundly human figures in modern royal history. Her lineage, firmly rooted in the same noble soil as the Windsors, continued through her sons, especially Prince William, the future king, who, in his choice of partner, reflects the same pattern of alliances within the aristocratic milieu. Her story encapsulates the intricate interplay of bloodline, tradition, and individuality at the heart of the British monarchy's enduring narrative. Prince William, born in 1982 amid intense royal fascination, embodied more than mere lineage. He was a living symbol of Britain's enduring monarchy, blending the relatable charisma of his mother, Diana, with the venerable authority of the Windsors. His existence was the result of centuries of interwoven aristocratic unions, meticulously crafted to sustain dynastic continuity. By childhood, William had already assumed public duties, reflecting the inescapable convergence of family, institution, and tradition shaping his identity. When William reached adulthood, speculation swirled around whether his marital choice would adhere to royal precedent, linking past and present nobility through carefully selected alliances. Catherine Middleton, initially perceived as a commoner, revealed a more intricate heritage upon closer examination. Genealogical research identified a shared ancestry with William, tracing back to Tudor times, positioning them as distant cousins, 11th cousins once removed. In royal contexts, even such tenuous blood connections reinforce institutional cohesion rather than detract from it. Catherine's appearance as a modern, relatable figure masked her family's subtle aristocratic ties, making her an acceptable partner within the monarchy's unspoken frameworks. Their 2011 nuptials symbolized a fusion of tradition and contemporary meritocracy, royal pomp interlaced with personal authenticity and university camaraderie. This blend affirmed monarchy's capacity for adaptation without surrendering its historical essence, maintaining an equilibrium that appeased both progressives and traditionalists. Their distant kinship was more than genealogical trivia. It exemplified the monarchy's implicit strategy of internal preservation through marital alliances, ensuring continuity amid change. William and Catherine's public image, harmonious, dependable, and carefully managed, contrasts with the tumultuous legacy of William's parents. Where Charles and Diana's union reflected incompatible roles and public strife, William and Catherine's relationship projects rehearsed equilibrium, balancing duty, modernity, and familial stability. Their three children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, represent the ongoing narrative of royal lineage, integrating elements from both Windsor and Middleton histories. Though the practice of cousin marriages has faded into the background, it persists as a subtle structural element within royal genealogy. Historically overt, today it remains a subdued but deliberate aspect of dynasty maintenance, a mechanism for preserving heritage and legitimacy through measured familial interconnectedness. In this light, William's marriage to Catherine, while outwardly fresh and modern, remains firmly rooted in tradition. It reflects an enduring royal doctrine: alliances must honor bloodlines while accommodating contemporary values. This nuanced balance ensures the monarchy's survival, blending novelty with continuity. Thus, the story progresses, each generation carrying forward the legacy of carefully calibrated unions, an ancient rhythm persisting beneath the veneer of modernity, reminding us that the Crown's preference for familiarity is as deliberate as it is timeless. Catherine Middleton, now widely recognized as the Princess of Wales, has often been cast as the quintessential commoner who ascended into royalty through marriage. This narrative, while appealing, simplifies a more intricate reality. Hailing from a middle-class background in Berkshire, Catherine's ascent to the royal spotlight appeared as a romantic transformation from an ordinary young woman to a future queen. Yet, beneath this narrative lies a nuanced genealogical connection. Catherine and Prince William are 11th cousins once removed, sharing a common ancestor in Sir William Gascoigne, a 15th century nobleman whose descendants permeate the British upper class. This ancestral link, though seldom publicized, underscores a subtle but significant intertwining of lineage beneath the surface of Catherine's seemingly grounded image. Her family's history blends middle-class entrepreneurship, as exemplified by her mother's success with party pieces, with an aristocratic lineage tracing back to Henry Percy, the second Earl of Northumberland, and ultimately to King Edward III. Thus, while Catherine's heritage is tinged with modernity, it is far from devoid of noble roots. Their relationship, beginning at St. Andrew's University, unfolded within carefully demarcated social trajectories. William, the heir burdened with centuries of dynasty, and Catherine, navigating the delicate balance of visibility and discretion. Their courtship, marked by phases of public and private engagement, was more choreography than mere romance, subjected to media scrutiny and the weight of public expectation, representing not just personal union but the continuity of the monarchy itself. The 2010 engagements signaled a significant institutional moment for the House of Windsor, still recovering from past scandals, presenting Catherine as a figure both relatable and suitably aristocratic. Their 2011 wedding epitomized this blend of tradition and modernity, with symbolism carefully orchestrated to convey stability and renewal, a union of distant cousins reinforcing the dynastic bond in a contemporary spectacle. Since then, Catherine has inhabited her royal role with a meticulous, almost forensic control, embodying calm and measured composure where William exhibits caution. Her public demeanour masterfully balances accessibility with an unyielding polish, reflecting an evolution of British aristocracy rather than a departure from it. The couple's children stand as living symbols of this fusion of lineages, exemplifying the monarchy's continuity through shared heritage. Ultimately, Catherine's story challenges the popular framing of her as an outsider. Instead, it reveals a monarchy sustained by deliberate preservation of lineage, where even seemingly modern unions are undergirded by deep genealogical ties. Her marriage illustrates the enduring principle that royal alliances, historically crafted for survival and consolidation, persist today in more subtle forms. This understanding invites reflection on the broader historical patterns of royal marriages, marked not simply by romance but by the strategic intertwining of bloodlines essential to the kingdom's foundation and endurance. Mary of Teck's ascent to queenship was far from the product of grand ambition or dramatic upheaval. Rather, it was the outcome of careful dynastic calculation and the unyielding logic of royal lineage. Born into the British aristocracy with noble but modest means, Mary's significance rested primarily on her blood ties. Her father, Francis, Duke of Teck, brought German royal connections, while her mother, Princess Mary Adelaide of Cambridge, linked her directly to the British monarchy as a granddaughter of King George III. These intertwined ancestries positioned Mary firmly within the intricate web of European royalty, making her a genetically suitable candidate for royal marriage long before the monarchy faced urgent questions of succession. Initially engaged to Prince Albert Victor, eldest son and heir to Edward VII, Mary's future seemed secure yet unremarkable, an arranged alliance built on duty and dynastic neatness. Albert Victor's sudden death from pneumonia shortly after their engagement left her betrothal unfulfilled and the court in a delicate predicament. The solution, the younger brother George, was both practical and genealogically fitting. Their marriage in 1893 was a seamless transition framed by ceremony and tradition, revealing the monarchy's preference for stability and continuity over personal sentiment or public perception. The fact that Mary married her deceased fiancé's brother and shared multiple lines of descent with George was not anomalous in a royal house accustomed to preserving bloodlines through interrelated unions. As queen consort, Mary embodied an austere, disciplined ideal of monarchy, contrasting sharply with the more expansive and imperial reign of Victoria. She was neither flamboyant nor prone to controversy. Instead, she adhered to formality and ceremony as indispensable elements of regal identity. Her letters and diaries reveal a woman steeped in moral rigor, maternal concern, and an uncompromising sense of duty, qualities that shape her presence as both a stabilizing force and a guardian of tradition during a period marked by social and political change. Mary's marriage to George V was characterized by mutual respect and formality rather than intimacy. Their shared reverence for order masked an emotional austerity that deeply influenced the atmosphere in which their children were raised. The royal household under Mary's stewardship was marked by emotional restraint, sometimes described by their offspring as cold and suffocating. Edward VIII's later reflections on his childhood hint at the personal cost of this rigid environment, while George VI's struggles displayed the weight of expectations inherited from parents who equated affection with weakness. Mary was not harsh out of cruelty, but out of an abiding conviction that the monarchy's survival demanded personal sacrifice and an unflinching commitment to bloodline purity and protocol. Through this unbending philosophy, she exerted a lasting influence that extended beyond her lifetime into the reign of her granddaughter, Queen Elizabeth II, who inherited not only royal blood but also a temperament forged through discipline and decorum. Mary of Teck's story is, ultimately, a study in monarchy as institution rather than individual triumph. She was not exceptional in the sense of rewriting history or embodying radical change. Instead, she was the quintessence of royal predictability and continuity. Her lineage, demeanor, and even the personal tragedies she endured aligned closely with the monarchy's paramount imperative: stability. Her presence ensured that, amid a world increasingly tumultuous, the royal bloodline remained intact and the rituals that defined sovereign authority persisted unbroken. George VI's reliance on Mary went beyond mere partnership. Their union was emblematic of the monarchy's enduring strategy of uniting kinship and duty, a union where love was supplanted by the immutable logic of shared ancestry and the relentless demands of monarchy. King George VI's ascent to the British throne was marked by an unexpected shift in dynastic plans. Unlike his elder brother, Prince Albert Victor, who was meticulously groomed for kingship through rigorous education in languages, governance, and ceremonial propriety, George was initially destined for a naval career. Sent to the Royal Navy at the young age of 12, he spent much of his youth traversing the seas, disciplined by the ship's rigging and deliberately distanced from political affairs. Yet the sudden death of Albert Victor in 1892 abruptly altered this trajectory, thrusting George from the periphery to the center of royal succession. His newfound responsibility was clear: marry suitably to cement the continuity of the crown. This urgency led to his union with Mary of Teck, initially betrothed to his late brother, reflecting the monarchy's preference for carefully calibrated alliances over romantic passion. Their marriage represented a precise consolidation of royal bloodlines, intertwined through multiple ancestral connections, second cousins via George III and third cousins through Christian IX of Denmark, exemplifying dynastic symmetry and genetic prudence. Throughout his reign, George V navigated some of the most turbulent decades of modern history: the First World War, the seismic Russian Revolution, and the domino collapse of European monarchies. Domestically, his approach was conservative and defensive. The priority was preservation of the monarchy, adherence to constitutional propriety, and avoidance of disruption. His marriage to Mary fortified the internal structure of the royal family by maintaining a tradition of dynastic purity as conceived by contemporary standards, but this came with a significant emotional cost. Renowned for his sternness and aversion to spontaneity, George fostered a household where duty overshadowed affection and ceremony supplanted warmth. This upbringing profoundly influenced his children. Edward VIII rejected the restrictive royal mold in favor of personal freedom and glamour, while George VI assumed the throne reluctantly, carrying the psychological burdens inherited from their strict domestic environment. Despite his emotional reserve, George V was politically astute. In a gesture underscoring nationalist sentiment during World War I, he rebranded the royal family from the Germanic House of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha to the distinctly British House of Windsor, a strategic reshaping of identity that helped secure the monarchy's survival amid widespread anti-German feeling. Nevertheless, His own lineage underscored the inherent contradictions within the European royal network. Deeply German and Danish through his mother Alexandra and wife Mary, George embodied the intertwined dynastic consolidations characteristic of the era. This interconnectedness bore poignancy during World War I, placing George at odds with his cousins Wilhelm II of Germany and Nicholas II of Russia, three grandchildren of Queen Victoria, each representing fading imperial powers confronted by revolutionary forces and defeat. George's reign, while steeped in tradition and protocol, also embraced the subtle democratization of monarchy. He permitted increased access to the public and press, adjusting royal visibility without relinquishing the private codes essential to royal continuity, particularly in marriage, where adherence to aristocratic unions remained a cornerstone. Though cracks would appear in this model in later years, George's blueprint persisted. The monarchy preferred a closed loop of alliances to ensure stability. His death in 1936 marked the end of a reign characterized not by affectionate popularity but by the maintenance of order amid upheaval. His marriage, emblematic of dynastic strategies rather than romantic idealism, succeeded in preserving the royal line, a paramount goal for George, who viewed family as institution and bloodline as the mechanism of monarchy. This legacy extended through his sons, notably into the next generation, where the royal lineage continued its carefully managed passage, blending ancestral familiarity with subtle shifts toward personal expression, a quiet evolution within a steadfast tradition. When George VI unexpectedly ascended the throne, it was not the result of a predetermined destiny but of profound disruption. The original plan had envisioned his elder brother, Edward VIII, reigning and perpetuating the Windsor lineage with the assumed ease afforded to a firstborn royal. Yet Edward's abdication in 1936, driven by his defiant choice to defy royal conventions for love, precipitated a constitutional crisis and exposed vulnerabilities within the monarchy's narrative. Into this void stepped Prince Albert, Duke of York, a reluctant and unprepared second son who nonetheless accepted the crown, adopting his father's regnal name as George VI. His marriage to Elizabeth Beausoleil, later the Queen Mother, was emblematic of the nuanced interplay between tradition and modernity defining the era. Though not royal by birth, Elizabeth's lineage traced back through the intertwined genealogies of British nobility, linking her distantly but meaningfully to George himself. Their union, framed publicly as affectionate and romantic, subtly reinforced dynastic continuity beneath its veneer of warmth. Elizabeth's social grace counterbalanced George's anxieties, and together they cultivated an image of steadfastness that resonated with a nation recovering from war and scandal. George VI's reign coincided with tumultuous times as Europe teetered under fascist pressures and the British Empire faced internal strains. The monarchy, still healing from Edward's abdication, required renewal, not through spectacle, but through sober resolve. George, lacking charisma, offered reassurance. Elizabeth complimented him with dignified optimism. Their joint refusal to abandon London during the Blitz and their presence amid bombed neighborhoods embodied a new royal symbolism based on shared sacrifice and loyalty rather than grandeur and divine right. Despite this modern facade, the Windsor dynasty's lineage remained anchored in tradition. The training and upbringing of their daughters, Elizabeth and Margaret, followed the long-standing royal script, emphasizing decorum and familial obedience. As George's health deteriorated post-war, his death in 1952 ushered in the reign of his daughter, Elizabeth II, inaugurating another phase of the monarchy's complex history of familial continuity. George VI's legacy rests not only on his unexpected kingship or wartime leadership, but equally on his role as guardian of royal bloodlines meticulously preserved across generations. His marriage, while publicly softened with the rhetoric of love, was another deliberate thread woven into the royal genetic fabric, a subtle form of inbreeding veiled by tradition. He ruled as a man profoundly aware of monarchy's cyclical nature, an institution sustained by expectation, repetition, and lineage. In his wife, his distant cousin and stabilizing counterpart, the monarchy found a quiet but enduring success that would reverberate throughout his daughter's prolonged reign and the dynasty's future. Ultimately, George VI preserved the essential continuity of a royal family whose blood, despite changing names and times, remained remarkably unaltered. Elizabeth Beauce-Lyon, later known as the Queen Mother, occupies a distinctive place in British monarchy history, revered for her public composure and survival through tumultuous times such as the Blitz. Born in 1900 into an ancient Scottish noble family, her lineage was steeped in aristocratic heritage, linking her distantly to the royal family through tangled genealogical ties forged over centuries. This background positioned her as an ideal match for Prince Albert, later King George VI, whose proposal she notably declined twice, wary of the relentless scrutiny royal life entailed. Their 1923 marriage symbolized a subtle shift in royal strategy, embracing a British aristocrat without a title to soften the monarchy's image in a world growing skeptical of hereditary privilege. As Duchess of York and eventually Queen Consort, Elizabeth mastered the art of public grace, embodying tradition while skillfully navigating complex public expectations. Her presence reassured a nation, especially during crises such as World War II, when she made notably resilient public appearances, blending personal dignity with an acute sense of public relations. Despite the public warmth, Elizabeth remained firmly committed to the preservation of monarchy as a dynastic institution, emphasizing continuity of bloodlines and tradition over personal expression. Her marriage typified this ethos, a calculated union within a familiar aristocratic circle rather than a romantic venture, which her daughter, Queen Elizabeth II, would later echo by marrying a distant cousin as well. Elizabeth's life thus reflects the contradictions of monarchy, a modernizing public face masking an enduring allegiance to centuries-old conceptions of royal identity and continuity. Her story recalls earlier monarchs whose reigns were similarly defined by alliances born of lineage, underscoring the persistent interplay between family, power, and history within the British crown. King James VI of Scotland, later James I of England, was born amid political upheaval and ascended a throne fraught with contradictions. His accession in 1603 united the crowns of two historically adversarial kingdoms, a unification achieved by both lineage and force of circumstance. Born to Mary, Queen of Scots, executed by her cousin Elizabeth I, and a father who was murdered, James's early life was shaped less by royal nurture and more by regents and political strategists. From infancy, he internalized that royalty entailed navigating peril and strategy rather than mere privilege. His marriage to and of Denmark, a union hastily arranged to fortify dynastic legitimacy, encapsulates the complexities of royal alliances. Ostensibly a diplomatic act between Scotland and Denmark, it was underpinned by consanguinity, and in James were first cousins once removed, linked through shared descent from Christian III of Denmark. This blood relation, common in royal circles to consolidate power, underscored the importance of preserving authority within controlled genealogical bounds. James and Anne's marriage, formalized when Anne was 14, began with a symbolic episode wherein James personally sailed to retrieve his delayed bride, underscoring the performative aspects of monarchy. Though their union produced heirs, most notably Charles I, whose reign would end in regicide, the marriage was marked by periods of estrangement and contrasting temperaments. It functioned less as a personal partnership and more as a dynastic instrument, yielding offspring to secure succession and stabilize political alliances while maintaining an appearance free from scandal. James's reign was characterized by the tension between religious factions, Presbyterian austerity and Anglican tradition, and the delicate balance of monarchical grandeur against parliamentary scrutiny. His writings, especially the Basilic and Doran, reveal an intense preoccupation with order, divine right, and the precariousness of kingship. This mindset found expression in his private life. His marriage mirrored these dualities, public unity masking private complexity. The king's approach to power included a pragmatic tolerance for religious divergence, while maintaining Protestant orthodoxy in public. And secret conversion to Catholicism, a perilous choice in Protestant England, further illustrated the nuanced personal dynamics beneath the public pageantry. The intertwining of bloodlines signified more than mere heredity. It was a calculated preservation of royal substance, ensuring that power remained concentrated within an exclusive circle. Anne's death preceded James's by 6 years, and though their marriage had become largely formal by then, it symbolized the enduring royal imperative to intertwine family loyalty, political strategy, and lineage preservation. James's legacy, the united crowns passed to Charles, continued established patterns of intermarriage and dynastic consolidation. Though he succeeded in merging two kingdoms at the summit of power, James never bridged the deeper divides within their peoples. Ultimately, his reign unfolds as a study in the complexities of monarchy, a realm where divine right intersected with human pragmatism, where love was a secondary concern to lineage, and where strategic kinship alliances like his marriage to and of Denmark were essential to sustaining royal authority. In James's world, maintaining the crown required that the royal bloodline circulate within familiar branches, a testament to the enduring paradoxes embedded in the exercise of monarchical power. And of Denmark entered the life of James not as an unforeseen figure but as a carefully predetermined solution, her path shaped before her arrival on Scottish soil. As a Danish princess of royal lineage, her bloodline bore sufficient shared ancestry to satisfy the enduring demands of dynastic purity, reinforcing an age-old framework governing royal unions. Politically uncontroversial and religiously adaptable, or at least discreet, and embodied the quintessential royal consort. Her marriage to James VI of Scotland, later James I of England, reflected the customary norms of European royalty, where in close kinship, Hera's first cousins once removed tracing descent from King Christian I of Denmark, was not just accepted but deemed prudent. The interconnectedness of royal families functioned less as discrete entities and more as intermarried networks, designed to secure diplomacy over conflict. Born in 1574 to King Frederick II of Denmark and Queen Sophia of Mecklenburg-Güstrow, and was reared in a Protestant court steeped in Lutheran values and Scandinavian pride. Known for her intelligence and forthright nature, these attributes would later serve her, though sometimes complicate matters, within the British monarchy. Raised to prioritize statecraft over personal desire, Anne's marriage was negotiated when she was just 13. A proxy wedding occurred at 14, followed by a tempestuous voyage to Scotland that culminated unexpectedly in Norway due to storms. In a display that blended romantic gesture with political calculation, James himself journeyed to escort her home. Their union was solemnized in a modest Protestant ceremony in Oslo in 1589. Upon joining the Scottish court, a realm colder both in climate and demeanour, and encountered a husband whose intellect and theatricality masked a difficult nature. Their relationship was marked by civility rather than warmth, frequently laced with disputes over court appointments and their children's upbringing. And sought influence. James, valuing independence, often resisted. Their shared bloodline legitimized their marriage officially but did little to ensure concord. Yet, like many royal partnerships, they navigated these tensions to present a facade of unity, for success was gauged not by affection but by progeny and the preservation of dynastic continuity without disruption. They bore 7 children, though tragedy shadowed the lineage with only 3 reaching adulthood: Henry, Frederick, Elizabeth, and Charles. Henry, the charismatic eldest, groomed to succeed, died at 18, a loss that deeply affected and shifted dynastic hopes onto Charles, her youngest surviving son destined for the throne as Charles I. Throughout these trials, Anne asserted herself beyond the ceremonial role of queen consort into a political actor. She clashed with James's courtiers over religion and education, her own religious convictions nuanced and enigmatic. Officially Anglican by conversion, she was widely believed to harbour covert Catholic sympathies, a precarious stance amid the era's sectarian divisions. Being a Protestant king's wife was one matter. Being his cousin and possible secret Catholic added layers of complexity to her position. Despite such religious and political frictions, Anne adept fulfilled the expectations of royalty, patronizing the arts, architecture, and theatre, and sustaining a court that, while discreetly resistant to James's dominance, maintained her political significance. Fashionable and ambitious, her influence was subtle yet persistent, challenging early impressions of passive compliance. She died in 1619 at 44, preceding James by several years, leaving behind a legacy of strategic subtlety, and did not overturn dynastic tradition but skillfully navigated its constraints, bending rules where possible to carve out a measure of autonomy. Her union with James exemplified the intricate web of familial alliances that preserved power within a narrow circle of elite houses. Anne's Danish lineage, linked through shared ancestry, was not merely acceptable. It was a vital thread in a tapestry woven to reinforce dynastic stability. Like many royal women before her, and was chosen less for love than for fit and function. Her descendants, most notably Charles I, inherited more than a crown. They inherited a complex legacy of intertwined bloodlines and a monarchy grappling with its identity amid the relentless repetition of names in its lineage, underscoring the enduring paradox at the heart of hereditary rule. Few monarchs evoke as instantly recognizable an image and as deeply entrenched a mythology as King Henry VIII. Known widely as the corpulent ruler with 6 wives, a fractious court, and a seismic religious schism, Henry has long been depicted in sharply contrasting terms, both as a tyrant and a visionary, a brutish figure and a reformer. Yet, beneath the theatrical narrative of his tumultuous matrimonial escapades and ecclesiastical rupture lies a more grounded reality. Before he severed England's ties with Rome or manipulated the crown as his personal game board, Henry did what many rulers of his era deemed essential. He married his cousin. Catherine of Aragon, a Spanish princess, devout Catholic, widow of Henry's elder brother Arthur, and notably his third cousin, embodied the convergence of dynastic strategy and shared bloodlines that underpinned royal alliances. Both traced their lineage to John of Gaunt, son of Edward III, linking them through a genealogical proximity that, while potentially raising ecclesiastical eyebrows, was broadly accepted among the nobility as a legitimate foundation for dynasty building. Marriage between close kin was a conventional mechanism to solidify alliances and preserve noble blood, a formula Henry and Catherine's union exemplified. The political undercurrents of their marriage were unmistakable. Catherine's initial betrothal to Arthur had symbolized an Anglo-Spanish alliance, imperiled when Arthur's untimely death threatened to unravel diplomatic ties. Replacing Arthur with Henry reaffirmed this bond, though it necessitated a papal dispensation due to canonical prohibitions against marrying a brother's widow, a dispensation grounded in the assertion that Catherine's prior marriage was unconsummated, a detail of profound future significance. In 1509, Henry wed the 23-year-old Catherine, his youthful ardour and chivalric ideals aligning with a traditional royal strategy: marry within the family, secure alliances, and produce heirs. Yet the anticipated progeny did not thrive. Multiple miscarriages and infant deaths left only their daughter Mary surviving infancy. Henry's anxieties deepened, not merely personal but profoundly political, as he perceived the fragile lineage undermining the monarchy's future. It is here that Henry's once comforting shared bloodline transformed into an existential dilemma. Believing himself cursed for contravening divine law by marrying his brother's widow, despite papal approval, he invoked Levitical scripture to argue his union was illegitimate and hence doomed to barrenness. To his mind, Mary could not resolve the succession crisis. Only a male heir sufficed. This conviction precipitated the infamous Great Matter, initiating Henry's quest to annul his marriage, fracturing England's religious allegiance, and leading to a procession of wives, several also related to him in varying degrees. Indeed, Catherine was not an anomaly, and Boleyn, Henry's second wife, was his second cousin once removed, and Jane Seymour, the third, traced common descent through Edward III. In the midst of courtly tumult, Henry's marital choices revealed a consistent and calculated logic, an unwavering commitment to dynastic purity. His personal life, while seemingly chaotic, was deeply entwined with Tudor political imperatives. Marrying kin reinforced legitimacy and safeguarded power. Familiar bloodlines signified security in a world where lineage was paramount. Tangled genealogies bolstered claims to the throne. Ultimately, Henry fathered 3 children by 3 wives: Mary with Catherine, Elizabeth with and Edward with Jane, each union steeped within the matrix of royal kinship. While his reign is most remembered for ruptures, religious and marital, it was, at its core, a testament to the enduring tradition of consanguineous royal marriage. Though he transformed the monarchy into a personal battleground, Henry never abandoned the ancestral script he inherited. The narrative transcends scandal. It reveals an unyielding insistence on marriages that were not merely politically expedient but genetically familiar. Catherine of Aragon, the woman who initiated this sequence, was far more than a dynastic placeholder. She was royal blood personified, equally enmeshed in the intricate web of cousin-bred nobility. Their shared lineage was the very framework of their alliance, and despite the ultimate fractures, it was a union deeply grounded in the complex realities of medieval and Renaissance monarchy. Catherine of Aragon's story unfolds against a tapestry of dynastic strategy and political intrigue in early 16th century Europe. Born into the highest echelons of Spanish royalty as the youngest child of the Catholic monarchs, Ferdinand II of Aragon and Isabella I of Castile, Catherine was groomed not merely for privilege but to fulfill a crucial diplomatic role. Her lineage connected her intimately to the English royal family. Through her mother's English ancestry, she and Henry VIII were third cousins, both descending from John of Gaunt, a son of Edward III, intertwining their lines in a tradition where royal marriages reinforced political alliances and bloodlines alike. Initially betrothed to Arthur, Prince of Wales and Henry's elder brother, their union epitomized the era's strategic cousin marriages. Yet this alliance was tragically short-lived, as Arthur died mere months after their 1501 wedding. Catherine, now a young widow in a foreign land, faced uncertain prospects that mirrored the fragile alliance between England and Spain. However, fate intervened diplomatically when Henry, then heir to the throne, was selected to marry Catherine to preserve the alliance. Their proposed marriage, forbidden by canon law due to its nature as a brother's widow's marriage, required a papal dispensation based on Catherine's claim that her marriage to Arthur had never been consummated, a contentious assertion with enduring historical consequences. Henry VIII's accession to the throne in 1509 marked the commencement of a marriage initially characterized by mutual respect and political harmony. Catherine's intelligence, religious devotion, and royal bearing complemented Henry's youthful vigor, and their union produced a daughter, Mary, after the loss of their infant son. Yet, the absence of a surviving male heir seeded doubt and anxiety within the Tudor court and Henry himself. His desire for a male successor became not only a personal obsession but a dynastic necessity, as the relatively new Tudor dynasty faced existential challenges. This quest for a male heir precipitated the unravelling of their marriage and the English ecclesiastical order. Henry's eventual repudiation of the papal dispensation and claim that his marriage was divinely invalid not only contested the legitimacy of his union with Catherine but also questioned the religious orthodoxy that had sanctioned it. Catherine's steadfast refusal to accept annulment, grounded in her legal and theological arguments, underscored the complex interplay of personal conviction, dynastic legitimacy, and international politics. Her resistance preserved, at least symbolically, the legitimacy of their daughter and Catherine's own status within the web of European royalty. She remained, in her own mind and many historical accounts, the rightful Queen of England. The crisis catalyzed by Henry and Catherine's marital conflict extended beyond personal realms, precipitating the English Reformation and a profound religious and political rupture. Catherine spent her later years in relative isolation, deprived of her queenship but unyielding in conviction. Though denied burial as queen, history has memorialized her as a pivotal figure whose bloodline endured through Mary I's reign, embodying the enduring intersection of dynastic ambition, religious upheaval, and personal tenacity. The subsequent marriage of Henry II and Boleyn would further entangle these themes of power, lineage, and legitimacy, reflecting the recurring paradoxes that shaped Tudor England's tumultuous history. And Boleyn's designation as a mere commoner grossly underrates her position within the Tudor court's intricate hierarchy of status and bloodlines. While lacking the formal titles of princess or duchess, and was firmly embedded within a network of noble alliances, her lineage meticulously woven through centuries of aristocratic marriages, and crucially, linked by blood to the monarch himself. Her ascendancy, though scandalous to contemporary Europe, adhered to the established conventions of royal matchmaking. She was a cousin distant enough to provoke intrigue yet sufficiently pedigreed to secure dynastic legitimacy. Born around 1501 to Thomas Boleyn and Lady Elizabeth Howard, the daughter of the second Duke of Norfolk, and descended from one of England's most prominent noble families, the Howards, whose bloodline permeated much of the Plantagenet tapestry. Through her Howard ancestry, Anne and Henry VIII were second cousins, united by descent from King Edward I and Eleanor of Castile. Although this connection might seem tenuous by modern standards, in the Tudor mindset it carried considerable weight, rendering Anne's bloodline effectively royal and thus safe. This royal connection is often overshadowed by popular portrayals that reduce her to an ambitious commoner who enticed a king and fractured a nation. Arriving at court, and was far from an outsider, she belonged to a family deeply entrenched in the machinery of monarchy. Her powerful uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, wielded considerable influence. Her father had diplomatic experience across Europe, and her sister Mary had already attracted Henry's attention. Educated abroad, fluent in several languages, and versed in continental courtly manners, and was intellectually sharp and socially adept. Crucially, she mastered the art of withholding herself, refusing to become Henry's mistress as her sister had, and instead insisted on marriage, a demand that created a profound crisis since Henry was wed to Catherine of Aragon, tied to the Spanish crown and the papacy. The ensuing 7-year struggle encompassed diplomatic deadlock, religious upheaval, and personal obsession, as Anne became Henry's fixation and eventually his queen in 1533, following his break with Rome and annulment of his first marriage. Pregnant with Elizabeth, the future emblem of England's enduring monarchy, Anne's queenship was fraught with tension. Courtiers remained divided, the public largely loyal to Catherine, and failing to provide a male heir, and fell from favour. By 1536, she faced charges of adultery, incest, and, by the time Jane Seymour emerged at Henry VIII's court, it was already a realm rife with instability and the residues of scandal. And Boleyn's abrupt downfall, marked by her rapid arrest, trial, execution, and hasty burial within the Tower of London, had sent shockwaves through the nobility. Mere weeks later, Jane Seymour ascended as Henry's third wife. Unlike the fiery Anne, Jane was cast as the antithesis, modest, pious, and compliant, seemingly the balm Henry sought after turmoil. Yet, beyond this comforting narrative lay a familiar pattern. Her rise was less about romantic relief and more about dynastic calculation. Born around 1508 to Sir John Seymour and Marjorie Wentworth, Jane's lineage was deeply rooted in England's aristocracy. Through her mother, she traced descent to Elizabeth Cheney and ultimately the Plantagenets, making her and Henry V cousins, a degree of kinship that, while not scandalous, was strategically sufficient for royal purposes. Far from unorthodox, such familial ties lent Jane ancestral legitimacy, positioning her as a stabilizing, native alternative following the diplomatic tensions of Catherine of Aragon and the explosive controversy of Anne Boleyn. Jane's service as a lady-in-waiting to both Catherine and Anne placed her in the king's periphery, facilitating her gradual ascent. She cultivated an image of virtue and restraint, reportedly resisting Henry's advances initially, a conventional role that invited pursuit and elevated her standing. However, this was no simple tale of innocent maidenhood. Jane's family, particularly her brothers Edward and Thomas Seymour, adept navigated court politics to capitalize on her favor. Her virtue was, in essence, a performance underpinning dynastic ambition. Marrying Jane allowed Henry to reassert a traditional vision of queenship, rooted in English nobility and measured pedigree. Their wedding took place on May 30th, 1536, barely 11 days after Anne Boleyn's execution. Jane stepped into the regal spotlight with practiced modesty, eschewing political engagement and embodying the silent submission that Henry now prized. Yet, her paramount significance lay in her ability to bear a male heir. In 1537, she gave birth to Edward, the long-awaited son who embodied the Tudor dynasty's hope for continuity. Jane's death, a mere 12 days later likely due to childbirth complications, swiftly enshrined her as an idealized queen, self-sacrificing and unwaveringly loyal. Her life and death reinforced the era's intertwining of personal sacrifice with dynastic imperative. Crucially, Jane's legacy was inseparable from her bloodline, which linked back to Plantagenet kings and the regimented tradition of intermarriage within the aristocracy. Her being the only wife Henry chose to be buried beside at St. George's Chapel spoke volumes. She symbolized not only maternal success but a dynastic harmony of lineage and loyalty. Though Jane's reign was brief and largely subdued, it epitomized the ongoing Tudor strategy, promoting noble cousins who embodied hereditary legitimacy and political expediency. She was less a departure from precedent than its continuation, another chapter in the monarchy's complex narrative where alliances were veiled as romance. Her marriage's true resonance lay less in drama and more in legacy, perpetuating a pattern where the bonds of shared ancestry reaffirmed royal stability amid the uncertainties of succession. King Edward IV exemplified the very image of kingship, radiating a regal presence amid the turbulence of the Wars of the Roses. Born in 1442 as the eldest son of Richard, Duke of York, Edward inherited a genealogically significant claim to the throne, tracing lineage through both Lionel of Antwerp and Edmund of Langley, sons of Edward III. This dual descent bolstered his political legitimacy during a period marked by shifting allegiances and brutal dynastic strife. Contrary to the expectations of his court and advisers, Edward's marriage defied conventional political strategy. Rather than securing alliances through a foreign royal bride, he married Elizabeth Woodville, a widow of Lancastrian ties and an Englishwoman without the customary diplomatic advantages of a royal dowry or foreign army. This choice caused consternation among nobles, yet concealed a more intricate genealogical reality. Elizabeth Woodville hailed from noble ancestry, intertwined with the Nevilles and Hollands, and was a distant cousin to Edward. Such cousin marriages were common in preserving royal bloodlines and consolidating power, placing Edward's union within a subtly traditional framework despite its apparent rupture with political expectation. Elizabeth's arrival at court ignited resentment due to her family's ambition and political baggage. Nevertheless, Edward staunchly supported her, legitimizing their marriage and elevating her relatives despite aristocratic opposition. Their 10 children, notably Elizabeth of York, further entwined the blood of York and Lancaster, culminating in the Tudor dynasty through Elizabeth's marriage to Henry VII. Thus, Edward's controversial nuptials, far from undermining royal interests, reinforced a dynastic continuity that shaped English monarchy for generations. His personal life, marked by military campaigns and occasional mistresses, did not overshadow his commitment to lineage and legacy. The marriage to Elizabeth Woodville, though scandalous to contemporaries, adhered to an enduring royal pattern, marrying within a familiar ancestral circle to maintain dynastic stability. Far from an outsider, Elizabeth became an integral figure in the royal genealogy, ultimately the grandmother of Henry VIII, whose reign perpetuated the ongoing dance of history where love and power are intertwined, and the constancy of bloodlines remains paramount. In this light, the story of Edward and Elizabeth reveals the complex interplay of affection, strategy, and ancestry that defined English royal marriages in an era of profound upheaval. Elizabeth Woodville's ascent to queenship was a nuanced episode not adequately captured by the prevailing narrative of a commoner usurping aristocratic privilege through mere seduction. To contemporaries, she appeared as a Lancastrian widow whose enchanting presence won over Edward IV, a prominent Yorkist monarch, thereby upsetting established noble hierarchies. Yet, this view neglects a crucial factor: the deep albeit distant familial ties Elizabeth shared with Edward. Unlike the overtly close cousin marriages common among European royalty, Elizabeth and Edward's kinship through the Holland and Neville lines connected them within a web of Plantagenet ancestry. Her lineage, far from foreign, was carefully interwoven with centuries of nobility. Elizabeth's mother, a former Duchess of Bedford, and her father, later Earl Rivers, endowed her with a status that, while not reigning elite, was steeped in aristocratic heritage. The court's disdain centered not on her bloodline's legitimacy but on her inability to uphold the exclusive image of dynastic alliances. Edward's silent defiance in marrying Elizabeth, eschewing the diplomatic norm of allying with a European princess, ignited controversy, particularly because Elizabeth was a widow with a large family poised to influence court politics. Their secret marriage, likely held without ceremony at her family residence, sparked uproar once revealed in 1464. Her coronation in 1465 did little to quell noble resentment, especially from powerful figures like the Earl of Warwick, whose hostility stemmed from the Woodvilles' rapid rise to power through marital kinship rather than political strategy. To critics, the Woodvilles were opportunists, yet their actions conformed to established patterns of aristocratic advancement. Elizabeth's legacy is inseparable from the fate of her children with Edward, 10 in total, including Elizabeth of York, whose marriage to Henry VII symbolically ended the Wars of the Roses by uniting the houses of York and Lancaster. Through this union, Elizabeth Woodville's bloodline permeated the Tudor dynasty, influencing monarchs from Henry VIII to Elizabeth I. Nevertheless, her personal life was fraught with turmoil. The civil wars forced her into sanctuary repeatedly, and following Edward IV's death, the disappearance of her sons, the so-called princes in the Tower, remains an unresolved historical tragedy that shadows her legacy. In the turbulent years after Edward's death, Elizabeth navigated a perilous political landscape, forging strategic alliances such as with Margaret Beaufort, which facilitated her daughter's eventual coronation and the establishment of Tudor rule. Her marriage, often scandalized for seemingly overstepping class boundaries, in fact reflects the subtler realities of cousin alliances, linking distant kin to maintain dynastic continuity. Elizabeth personified this balance between insider and outsider, her bloodline both familiar and distinctly consequential. Her story epitomizes the complex interplay of kinship, power, and survival in late medieval England. Even the final Yorkist king, Richard III, married within this extended family network, underscoring the enduring logic and peril of intertwining political, familial, and hereditary bonds. Elizabeth Woodville's life and lineage thus encapsulate the intricate, and sometimes fraught, dynamics of royal bloodlines, where marriage was both a personal union and a calculated gesture toward a dynasty's preservation. King Richard III occupies a uniquely complex position within English royal history, embodying a persistent duality as both vilified usurper and tragic figure ensnared by political propaganda. To some, he is the determined claimant who seized the throne through ruthless means, notably the mysterious disappearance of his nephews. To others, he is a monarch whose reputation was unfairly marred by Tudor narratives. His life and reign, however, must be understood within the enduring frameworks that shaped medieval monarchy, power secured through bloodline and marriage. Born in 1452 at Fotheringhay Castle to Richard, Duke of York, and Cecil Neville, Richard was deeply entrenched in Yorkist lineage, with ties to Edward III on both sides of his family. His upbringing coincided with the turbulent Wars of the Roses, a conflict that fragmented England into competing factions. Distinguished as a capable commander, Richard earned the title Duke of Gloucester early in life and played a crucial role alongside his brother, Edward IV, during multiple military campaigns. Perhaps most tellingly, Richard's marriage to Neville in 1472 exemplifies the intricate dynastic strategies characteristic of Plantagenet rule. And his first cousin once removed and daughter of the powerful Richard Neville, Earl of Warwick, descended from the Plantagenet line herself. Previously married to Edward of Westminster, the Lancastrian heir, Anne's transition from Lancastrian princess to Yorkist consort symbolized a calculated consolidation of power and inheritance. Through this union, Richard secured the vast Neville estates and reinforced his Yorkist legitimacy, illustrating that royal cousin marriages functioned as intentional safeguards to preserve the crown's continuity within a confined bloodline. Their sole offspring, Edward of Middleham, died in childhood, leaving Richard without a direct heir. This dynastic fragility, compounded by Anne's death in 1485 amid rumours of foul play, further destabilized his tenuous claim. While such rumours likely stem from Tudor propaganda, the loss of his wife and heir undeniably weakened Richard's position, rendering his reign vulnerable. Yet, Anne Neville's role extended beyond that of queen consort. She embodied the deliberate intertwining of royal bloodlines, a hallmark of Plantagenet strategy. Their marriage was not merely personal but a political act affirming continuity within a lineage deeply entwined through repeated intermarriage. Richard's death at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485 marked the twilight of Plantagenet rule and the dawn of the Tudor era. Despite his posthumous obscurity and the later uncovering of his remains beneath a modern parking lot, Richard's alliance with Anne Neville reflects a persistent royal pattern, maintaining power through lineage in a world where bloodline dictated legitimacy and authority. In sum, Richard III and Anne Neville's union exemplifies the enduring medieval royal practice of consolidating power through carefully orchestrated kinship ties. Their marriage underscored the principle that sovereignty was intertwined with inherited identity, a dynamic that would continue to shape English monarchy long after their deaths, despite the seismic political shifts that followed. Anne Neville occupies a complex and often overlooked position within the fraught tapestry of English Queen's consort. Her narrative, situated between the shadows cast by the more famous Anne Boleyn and Catherine of Aragon, deserves a thoughtful re-evaluation. Anne's existence was far from passive. It was deeply entrenched in the mechanics of inheritance, political maneuvering, and, above all, family dynamics, repeatedly the same family at the centre of England's turbulent fortunes. Born not merely into nobility but into the combustible milieu of the Wars of the Roses, Anne's lineage was a reflection of the dynastic fractures that rent the kingdom. Her father, Richard Neville, 16th Earl of Warwick, known to history as the Kingmaker, exercised extraordinary power, engineering the rise and fall of monarchs to suit his aims. Anne's mother, Anne Beauchamp, brought with her a prestigious bloodline that intertwined with the Plantagenets, embedding and deeply in the veins of royal heritage on both sides. And Neville was, therefore, not just proximate to power. Her birth singled her out as a vessel and instrument in the dynastic struggles of her time. Royal women like and were often treated as pieces on a geopolitical chessboard, their marriages orchestrated for gains in territory and influence. Her first union was with Edward of Westminster, the sole heir of Henry VI and Margaret of Anjou, representing the Lancastrian faction, a direct opposition to Anne's own Yorkist family. This marriage, arranged by her father during a brief Lancastrian resurgence, was as bold as it was ironic. The daughter of a Yorkist power broker married to the Lancastrian prince, a union born from political expediency rather than affection. Yet the alliance was tragically short-lived. Edward perished at the Battle of Tewkesbury in 1471, likely before and he could solidify their roles as future monarchs. Left a widow in her teens within a collapsing Lancastrian cause, and found herself in a precarious liminal state. Her father's rebellion had failed, her husband was dead, and her prospects hovered uncertainly between diminishing royal privilege and fragile survival. It was during this uncertain period that another relative, Richard, Duke of Gloucester, re-entered her life. Their kinship was more than familial convenience. Both descended from Edward III, linking them further within the tangled web of Plantagenet bloodlines through different lines. Richard's interest in and was calculated. Marriage would reclaim her valuable dowry and the Warwick inheritance for the Yorkist cause, restoring political and familial coherence. However, this arrangement was far from a simple matter of affection or convenience. During the negotiations and transitions, Anne was effectively held under the watch of her sister Isabel and Isabel's husband, George, Duke of Clarence, yet another Plantagenet cousin with vested interests, rumoured to have hidden Anne away to secure the Warwick legacy for himself. Whether conspiracy or legend, this familial intrigue underlines the depths to which personal relationships were inextricably tied to political strategy. Eventually, Richard succeeded in marrying and in 1472, when she was around 15 and he about 20, a union that reunited the Warwick estates and positioned Anne as a future queen. Anne's coronation as queen consort in 1483 came with Richard's controversial seizure of the throne as Richard III, following his declaration of his nephew's illegitimacy. Yet the grandeur of her queenship was fleeting. The couple's only son, Edward of Middleham, died young, and Anne's health rapidly declined, culminating in her death in 1485. Her passing precipitated a political void, fueling speculation about Richard's intentions toward Elizabeth of York and whether Anne had simply been displaced. Amidst these conjectures, the more prosaic reality endured. A royal marriage designed to preserve dynastic power and the Plantagenet line had ultimately failed to secure the intended future. And Neville's life exemplifies the prescribed trajectory for women of her status in 15th century England. Born of noble blood, strategically wedded to secure land and alliances, and silently bound within the relentless cycle of familial consolidation. Her narrative, while less celebrated than some, embodies the intricate interplay between kinship, power, and survival during one of England's most tumultuous eras. Following in this Samba tradition would be Mary, Queen of Scots, whose own reign and alliances would continue this pattern, underscoring the quiet but decisive dynasty-building logic that governed noble women's lives in this age. Mary, Queen of Scots, was a figure of profound historical complexity, her life intricately woven into the fabric of European dynastic politics. Born in 1542 and crowned at a mere 6 days old, Mary Stuart was not only Queen of Scots but also briefly Queen Consort of France through her marriage to Francis II. Her lineage, rich with Tudor blood, connected her to nearly every significant royal house, making her a pivotal figure on the grand chessboard of monarchy. Yet, what distinguished Mary was not merely her royal status but her active engagement in the volatile political landscapes of her time. Raised amidst the humanist intellectual fervour of the French Renaissance, Mary was groomed to reign with sophistication and authority. However, her return to a Scotland fraught with religious tension and political factionalism in 1561 marked the beginning of a turbulent reign. As a Catholic queen in a predominantly Protestant realm, she faced relentless scrutiny and opposition. Her 1565 marriage to Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, her cousin and fellow Tudor descendant, was a union steeped in dynastic strategy, intended to reinforce her claim to the English throne. This alliance, however, plunged her deeper into political intrigue, as Darnley's ambition and capability proved disastrous, culminating in his mysterious death in 1567 under suspicious circumstances. The marriage between Mary and Darnley exemplifies the paradox of dynastic politics. It simultaneously consolidated claims and invited peril. Their consanguinity enhanced Mary's legitimacy but also intensified her vulnerability, highlighting the fragile interplay between bloodlines and power. In the aftermath, her subsequent marriage to James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, himself entangled in Darnley's demise, accelerated her downfall, leading to her imprisonment and eventual execution. Lord Henry Stuart, known as Lord Darnley, embodied the essential dynastic qualifications of his era: royal lineage linking him to both Scottish and English thrones, an imposing physical stature, and striking appearance. Yet, despite these essentials on paper, he was markedly deficient in crucial qualities such as patience, sound judgment, and prudence. In the 16th century, however, competence was secondary to bloodline. Darnley's value lay in his genealogy. Born in England in 1545 to Margaret Douglas, niece of Henry VIII, and Matthew Stuart, Earl of Lennox, he was doubly descended from Henry VII. This close familial connection made him Mary, Queen of Scots' first cousin, a fact that both alarmed Elizabeth I's advisers and emboldened Catholic loyalists. Their union in 1565 was more than matrimonial. It was a strategic consolidation of Tudor claims and a political challenge to Protestant England. Elizabeth I, childless and increasingly wary of succession threats, viewed Mary and Darnley's marriage as a formidable Catholic alternative to her Protestant regime. Royal marriage at the time served as a crucial tool for preserving lineage purity, securing claims, and limiting foreign interference, especially through cousin unions. Yet, Darnley quickly emerged as a liability. His arrogance, erratic nature, and hunger for power alienated many, especially when he aggressively sought the crown matrimonial, effectively a co-sovereign title. His involvement in the fatal intimidation of Mary's secretary, David Rizzio, deeply fractured their personal and political relationship. Their union bore a son, James, in 1566, achieving the dynastic aim, a male heir to unify the Scottish and English claims. However, by early 1567, their marriage had disintegrated, culminating in Darnley's suspicious death, his residence blown up and his strang. King James II of England and VII of Scotland, born in 1633 to Charles II and Henrietta Maria of France, epitomized the intricate entanglement of European royal lineages and their enduring traditions. His heritage traced directly to Mary, Queen of Scots, through his father, while through his mother he was connected to the Bourbon dynasty and the broader Catholic European aristocracy. By the time James ascended to the throne, Intermarriage among cousins had moved beyond a mere custom to a deeply ingrained bureaucratic practice within royalty, a calculated effort to preserve bloodlines, alliances, and dynastic continuity. His marriage choices exemplified this. Following the death of his first wife, and Hyde, James's subsequent union in 1673 with Mary of Modena, his Italian fourth cousin and a Catholic princess, reinforced this long-standing principle of marital familiarity rather than political novelty. Though the age gap, James being 40 and Mary only 15, was considerable, it was neither unprecedented nor politically objectionable. The decisive factors were her Catholic faith, noble lineage, and familial connection, all crucial in the intricate chess game of European power. Yet this marriage ignited panic in Protestant England, especially with the birth of their son, James Francis Edward, in 1688. The prospect of a Catholic heir from a closely related Catholic royal couple deeply unsettled the Protestant establishment, triggering the Glorious Revolution and James's eventual exile. Nonetheless, the marriage symbolized more than personal union. It was a deliberate perpetuation of ancient rituals meant to sustain a royal bloodline deemed intrinsically valuable, even in defeat. James and Mary's exile and their son's lifelong claims to a contested crown underscored the complex interplay of bloodline, religion, and legitimacy, a triad that defined their era. Their story invites reflection on the paradoxes of monarchy, where maintaining dynastic purity could simultaneously catalyze political downfall. In the thread of this legacy, Mary of Modena's life in exile would later illuminate the stark reality that royal birth and marriage, while powerful, were not guarantees of enduring sovereignty. Mary of Modena's entry into the intricate web of European royalty was less about disruption than continuity, emblematic of a time when dynastic preservation trumped all else. Born in 1658 to Italian aristocracy, Mary's bloodlines intertwined with the powerful noble houses of Habsburg and Bourbon descent, reflecting a centuries-old strategy of cousinly unions designed to cement political alliances and uphold elite privilege. Marrying James, Duke of York and later James II of England, this arrangement underscored the entwined personal and political motivations underpinning royal marriages. He sought a young Catholic bride to bolster his religious stance in a stanchly Protestant England, and Mary's noble pedigree made her an acceptable, if scarcely celebrated, queen. Mary's tenure at the English court was marked by personal tragedy and political trepidation. Exiled from the Protestant succession that favoured James's daughters by his first wife, Mary, and Anne, she nonetheless played a crucial role in James's ambitions to establish a Catholic succession. The birth of her son, James Francis Edward, in 1688, should have secured the Stuart line but instead ignited widespread panic, fueled by rumours that the infant was not truly hers, a narrative born of anti-Catholic sentiment and fear of a Catholic dynasty. This crisis precipitated the Glorious Revolution, culminating in James's deposition by his daughter Mary and her husband William of Orange, themselves Protestant cousins, symbolizing yet another iteration of dynastic consolidation through closely related lineages. In exile in France, Mary transformed from queen consort to queen-in-waiting, stewarding a Jacobite court that would champion her son's contested claim to the throne. Her role as a mother of the old pretender and a custodian of Catholic monarchist hopes was inseparable from her aristocratic lineage and the enduring strategy of cousinly alliances. Though she died far from the throne in 1718, her legacy was pivotal in sustaining the Jacobite cause and the dynastic ethos that defined British royal history, an ethos that persisted through subsequent rulers like Queen and James's Protestant daughter and Mary's stepdaughter, who continued the tradition of familial interconnection as a political imperative. Mary of Modena's life thus encapsulates the complexities of identity, faith, and power within a monarchy perpetually navigating between personal loyalty and the unforgiving logic of inheritance. Queen and stands as both the culmination and conclusion of the Stuart dynasty's labyrinthine saga, a monarch whose significance lies less in flamboyant spectacle and more in the sober endurance of a fragile monarchy. Born in 1665 to James, Duke of York, later James II, and Hyde, her Protestant upbringing contrasted sharply with her father's Catholicism, a divide emblematic of the religious and political fissures that shape her era and secured her eventual ascension. In the intricate dance of dynastic politics, Anne's marriage to Prince George of Denmark in 1683 epitomized the strategic intertwining of European royal bloodlines. Both shared descent from northern European houses, such as that of King Christian III of Denmark and the House of Oldenburg, reflecting centuries of intermarriage designed to preserve legitimacy and consolidate power. George, a Protestant ally and notably unambitious figure, posed no threat to Anne's sovereignty. His value lay predominantly in reinforcing dynastic continuity. Yet, it was in the realm of progeny that Anne's reign revealed its deepest tragedy. Despite numerous pregnancies, at least 17, she endured repeated miscarriages and the death of nearly all her children in infancy, with only one son, William, surviving into childhood before dying at 11. This relentless personal grief, set against the backdrop of dynastic expectation, underscored the peril inherent in close-kin marriages. The Stuarts' persistent intermarriage, mimicking broader European royal practice, began yielding lethal consequences. Heightened infant mortality and fragile heirs, stark evidence of the genetic vulnerabilities entwined with monarchical continuity. Anne's reign, 1702 to 1714, was marked by momentous political developments, including the Acts of Union that birthed Great Britain and deft navigation of foreign wars and domestic alliances. Her leadership, though lacking the flamboyance of predecessors, demonstrated steadfastness amid personal and political trials, all shadowed by the looming question of succession. Without surviving heirs, Anne's death signaled the extinguishing of the Stuart line. The dynasty's self-imposed familial constraints had inexorably led to its demise, its convoluted genealogical web collapsing inward. Succession passed to the House of Hanover, a German lineage connected distantly through Sophia of Hanover, a granddaughter of James I. This transition heralded continuity in religious allegiance and dynastic strategy, rather than in bloodline distinctiveness. The Hanovers imported the same principles, cautious in marriage within the extended royal family, privileging Protestantism and genealogical legitimacy over charisma or popular appeal. King George I embodied this lineage philosophy, representing another iteration of the dynasty's enduring pattern, one of familial consolidation, dynastic survival, and the intricate, sometimes fatal, interplay between blood and power. Prince George of Denmark occupies a subtle, often overlooked place in the annals of British history, his legacy overshadowed by the more prominent figure of his wife, Queen Anne. Neither a sovereign himself nor a distinguished military or political leader, George's historical significance lies less in personal achievement than in his embodiment of a long-standing dynastic tradition. His role was emblematic, a quiet anchor within the intricate web of European royal alliances, where family connections were paramount in maintaining dynastic continuity and political stability. Born in 1653 to King Frederick III of Denmark and Sophie Amalie of Brunswick-Luneburg, George's pedigree was firmly rooted in the aristocratic Lutheran and militaristic cultures of Northern Europe. More crucial, however, was his genealogical position. Through his mother, he was distantly related to English and Scottish royalty, connected to Queen and through the convoluted intermarriages among Germanic and Scandinavian noble houses such as the Hanoverians, Stuarts, and Oldenburgs. These complex familial ties were vital in the monarchical calculus of the 17th century, where Protestant bloodlines and noble lineage were carefully preserved through strategic cousin marriages. When the time came to arrange a marriage for Princess Anne of York, later Queen Anne, George emerged as the ideal candidate. His Protestant faith and noble status aligned closely with the political and dynastic requirements of the English crown. Moreover, his subdued public profile and unassuming nature ensured he would not eclipse his authority, a critical consideration in a court rife with factionalism. Their union served a dual purpose. It reinforced the perceived purity of the royal bloodline and symbolized a calculated alliance intended to consolidate the House of Stuart's hold on power. Though their marriage was arranged, accounts suggest that mutual affection and compatibility existed between George and Anne, a notable facet given the often transactional nature of royal marriages. Arriving in England and marrying, and in 1683, George embraced a largely supporting role that lasted over 2 decades. He eschewed political machinations and scandal, maintaining a stabilizing presence amid a turbulent royal family marked by plots and reversals. While publicly inconspicuous, his significance lay in preserving the dynastic fabric through his blood ties. Yet this seemingly stable partnership was marred by profound personal and dynastic tragedy, and suffered 17 pregnancies, most ending in miscarriage, stillbirth, or early infant death, a relentless pattern that strained her physically and emotionally. Only one child, William, Duke of Gloucester, survived beyond infancy, and even he died young. This heartbreaking sequence was not merely a private sorrow but a constitutional crisis, as their childless marriage thwarted the primary dynastic objective, securing a viable heir and thus continuity of the Protestant succession. George's role as supportive husband and royal consort, bearing the title Duke of Cumberland, contrasted with his limited political influence. Upon Anne's accession in 1702, he did not assume kingship, underscoring his position as consort in name but subordinate in power. The marriage, while failing to perpetuate their dynasty, epitomized the enduring royal logic that prioritized intrafamilial alliances to maintain legitimate succession and political cohesion, particularly in a kingdom still sensitive to religious and dynastic unrest. Additionally, George's extensive European connections reinforced England's Protestant alliances and provided a measure of diplomatic reassurance. His kinship with and acceptance within the court reflected the monarchy's cautious navigation of external threats and internal divisions. His death in 1708 prompted a rare public display of grief from Anne, revealing the personal bond beneath the political arrangement. She never remarried, and their marriage symbolized the final chapter of a royal strategy that revered consanguinity as strength. However, this reverence would soon give way to suspicion. The subsequent Hanoverian dynasty continued the practice of cousin marriage. But the deleterious genetic consequences, mental illness, congenital disorders, and fragile heirs became increasingly evident. The dynastic strategy, once considered indispensable, transformed into a hazard that foreshadowed the monarchy's evolving challenges. With the childless and succeeded by George I, who married Sophia Dorothea of Celle in a union even more intimately consanguineous, the pattern of intrafamilial marriages crystallized into a double-edged instrument of power, bearing both political intention and private sorrow. Prince George's life and marriage thus personify the intricate balance of dynastic politics in the early modern monarchy, a blend of calculated alliance, personal sacrifice, and the persistent tension between the ideals of bloodline purity and the unpredictable realities of inheritance and health. His story invites reflection on how monarchy, while anchored in tradition, wrestled with the heavy costs of preserving itself in an era of political fragility and shifting power. King George I's ascension to the British throne in 1714 exemplifies the complex interplay of dynastic politics and religious priorities that shaped early modern monarchy. Unlike earlier British kings who married cousins to consolidate power, George was brought in primarily due to his Protestant lineage amidst a sea of Catholic claimants. Upon Queen Anne's death without heirs, the throne bypassed more than 50 Catholic relatives, landing on George Louis of Hanover, a German prince whose principal qualification was genealogical. He was the great-grandson of James I, Protestant, and distantly royal. This reliance on bloodline, despite a lack of charisma or popularity, was a calculated political necessity. George's reign also introduced continental matrimonial traditions, notably the custom of intrafamily marriage intended to safeguard dynastic continuity. Prior to his rule in Britain, George had married his first cousin Sophia Dorothea of Celle, a union orchestrated less for affection than dynastic strategy. Born to Ernest Augustus, Elector of Brunswick-Luneburg, and Sophia of the Palatinate, a granddaughter of James I, George's claim to the throne was legal but lacked warmth in England. In Hanover, however, his standing demanded a suitable marriage to preserve noble ties. Sophia Dorothea brought wealth, connections, and a compatible lineage intertwined with German, Scandinavian, and British nobility. Their cousinship was deliberate, reinforcing bonds deemed essential to avoiding fractured allegiances or diluted prestige. Yet their marriage quickly deteriorated into a formal alliance devoid of personal happiness. They had 2 children, George Augustus, later George II, and Sophia Dorothea of Hanover, fulfilling their dynastic duties. George's preference for mistresses and Sophia's unhappy solitude, culminating in secretive correspondence and eventual scandal, highlight the personal costs behind political marriages. By the time George became King of Great Britain, he had already confined Sophia to a remote German castle, and they never reconciled. His choice not to remarry likely reflects a desire to sidestep further complications surrounding her status, effectively erasing her from the public narrative. George's rise was intrinsically tied to the Parliamentary Settlement Act of 1701, which restricted succession to Protestant heirs descending from his mother, Sophia of Hanover. Though genealogically far down the list, he was first by legal design. Arriving in England speaking little English and accompanied by a retinue of German courtiers, George's foreignness endeared him to few. His weak political presence enhanced the role of ministers and highlighted his detachment, reinforcing his image as an outsider. Yet for all his unpopularity, the paramount factor was his bloodline, one that codified intermarriage among nobility to preserve Protestant succession. Behind this crown, veiled in the shadows of dynastic necessity, stood Sophia Dorothea, a wife, cousin, and queen in title only. Though marginalized and imprisoned, she bore the weight of preserving the lineage that Parliament prioritized over nationality or personal affinity. Her fate underscores the heavy price exacted by the imperatives of royal bloodlines and political expediency during one of Britain's most transformative succession crises. Sophia Dorothea of Celle's life exemplifies the stark transformation of royal marriage from ceremonial alliance to a form of imprisonment. Born in 1666 to George William, Duke of Brunswick-Luneburg, and Elwana d'Iadol, her noble lineage was complicated by her mother's lesser status, which cast a lingering shadow over her position. Despite this, as her father's sole heir, she was legitimized and endowed with a considerable fortune, making her a valuable matrimonial prospect. Her cousin, George of Hanover, later George I, married her in 1682, motivated by financial and dynastic pragmatism rather than affection. Their union was orchestrated with chilling precision. George needed wealth, Sophia needed status, and both required the maintenance of familial ties. Emotionally, the marriage was barren. George found Sophia frivolous. She viewed him as coarse and unfaithful. His numerous mistresses alienated her further, and their court remained cold both in ambience and feeling. Though they bore 2 children, George Augustus and Sophia Dorothea, fulfilling dynastic necessities, the couple's relationship deteriorated into acrimony. Seeking solace, Sophia formed an intimate connection with Count Philip Christoph von Königsmarck, a Swedish nobleman. Whether this relationship was romantic or merely a close friendship is uncertain, but what followed was unambiguous. Königsmarck vanished mysteriously in 1694 after visiting Sophia. Accused of adultery, a grave charge for women in her era, Sophia was not publicly tried or executed. Instead, George divorced her and confined her to Celle Castle for 32 years, severing all contact with her children and erasing her from official histories. This harsh treatment underscores the limited agency afforded to royal women who stepped beyond their prescribed roles: marry a relative, produce heirs, and remain silent. Yet, despite her enforced obscurity, her legacy endured through her children. Her son ascended as George II, and her daughter married into European royalty, ensuring that the bloodline she was imprisoned to protect continued to influence crowns and continents. Sophia's story is a sobering reflection on the contradictions embedded within monarchical traditions, where allegiance to family and state could become a prison of its own making. Remarkably, cousin marriages persisted unabated, with successors continuing to intertwine political, religious, and familial ambitions in intricate alliances, as demonstrated by the subsequent royal marriage involving not just a cousin but a political and ideological partner pivotal to British history. King William III's story is one marked by intricate family ties and profound political upheaval. Born in 1650 in The Hague, William was both a Dutch prince through his father, William II of Orange, and a Stuart through his mother, Mary, daughter of England's King Charles I. His marriage in 1677 to Mary II, his first cousin and daughter of King James II, was no mere romantic alliance but a calculated political strategy aimed at strengthening Protestant solidarity against Catholic France. At just 15, Mary married the 27-year-old William, intertwining familial loyalty with political necessity. Yet their union's significance extended beyond genealogy. In 1688, alarmed Protestant nobles invited William to invade England, fearing that James II Catholic-leaning absolutism threatened their nation. This event, known as the Glorious Revolution, was remarkably bloodless but transformative. James II fled, and William and Mary ascended as joint sovereigns, an unprecedented equal partnership in England's monarchy. William, with his military acumen, complemented Mary's hereditary legitimacy, together championing a constitutional monarchy rooted in parliamentary supremacy and administrative governance rather than divine right. Their marriage, while childless, Mary dying of smallpox in 1694, left an indelible mark not through heirs but through precedent. William's reign embodied a new model of rulership, one where intrafamily marriages reinforced political stability and religious identity amid shifting power dynamics. Upon William's death in 1702, the crown passed to Mary's sister Anne, but the blueprint William established endured, shaping the future of the British monarchy. This pattern of intertwined bloodlines and political alliances sets the stage for the next monarch, Queen Victoria, a queen whose reign was similarly defined by lineage, marriage, and the complex legacy of familial strategy.